a haunting tale of jealousy and revenge. There was once a college student named Emily who moved into a small apartment in the heart of the city. It was a cozy place, but there was something strange about it that she couldn't quite put her finger on. The rent was affordable, and the location was perfect, so she brushed off the uneasy feeling and decided to move in anyway. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal. However, as time went on, Emily began to notice something odd. Her roommate, a young woman named Laura, never made a sound. She never spoke, never listened to music, and never had any visitors. Emily found it strange, but she didn't want to be rude and ask Laura about it, so she let it go. One night, Emily woke up to the sound of shuffling in the silent roommate's room. She assumed Laura was just getting ready for bed and tried to go back to sleep, but something felt off. The next morning, Emily went to knock on Laura's door to see if she wanted to grab breakfast together, but there was no response. She tried the doorknob, but it was locked from the inside. Concerned, Emily contacted the building manager, who reluctantly agreed to unlock the door. When they opened it, Emily gasped in horror. Laura was lying on the ground, her body twisted and contorted in an unnatural way. She had been dead for days, and her silence had hidden her demise. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Laura had been dead for nearly a week, and her death had been caused by a mysterious figure that was never caught. Emily was horrified to realize that she had been living with a dead body for days and had no idea. From that day forward, Emily was never able to shake off the feeling that something was watching her from the shadows. The silent roommate haunted her dreams, and every creak of the floorboards made her heart race. She eventually moved out of the apartment, unable to live with the memory of the horrific discovery. Despite moving out of the apartment, Emily found that the memory of her silent roommate continued to haunt her. She found herself jumping at every sound and feeling uneasy in even the safest of places. Her friends and family tried to assure her that it was just a natural reaction to such a traumatic experience, but Emily knew that there was more to it than that. As time went on, Emily became increasingly obsessed with finding out what had caused Laura's death. She spent hours scouring police reports, news articles, and internet forums, trying to piece together any clues that might lead her to the truth. It was a lonely and often frustrating journey, but she couldn't let go of the feeling that there was something more to Laura's story. One day, while scrolling through an online message board, Emily stumbled upon a thread discussing a local urban legend. According to the story, there was a ghost that haunted the city, preying on young women who lived alone. The ghost was said to be the spirit of a woman who had been murdered by her own roommate, and it was said that she would possess the bodies of those who lived alone in order to seek revenge. At first, Emily dismissed the story as nothing more than a creepy myth. However, as she continued to research the ghost, she found that there were several reports of unexplained deaths and disappearances that seemed to match the legend. The more she dug, the more convinced she became that there was something more to Laura's death than a simple accident. With newfound determination, Emily decided to launch her own investigation into the urban legend. She spent countless hours interviewing witnesses, poring over old police files, and even visiting the places where the ghost was said to have appeared. It was a daunting task, but Emily was driven by a sense of purpose she had never felt before. As she delved deeper into the mystery, Emily began to experience strange occurrences that she couldn't explain. She would hear footsteps in the hallway outside her apartment, even when there was no one there. She would wake up in the middle of the night to find her belongings moved or rearranged. At first, She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination, but as the incidents continued, she knew that there was something more sinister at work. Despite the mounting evidence of the ghost's existence, Emily found that no one else believed her. Her friends and family thought that she was letting her obsession with Laura's death consume her, and even the police were dismissive of her claims. But Emily refused to give up. She knew that she was onto something, and she was determined to get to the bottom of it. It wasn't until one night, as Emily was sitting alone in her apartment, that she finally came face to face with the ghost. She had been working late, trying to piece together the final clues in her investigation, when she heard a faint whisper coming from the corner of the room. She turned to look, and there, standing in the shadows, was a figure that she recognized from the urban legend. The ghost was pale and ethereal, with long dark hair and piercing blue eyes. She seemed to be staring directly at Emily, and as the silence in the room grew heavier, Emily could feel her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, she was frozen in fear, unable to move or even breathe. But then, something shifted inside of her, and she found a strength that she had never known before. In a burst of courage, Emily stood up and faced the ghost head-on. She demanded to know what had happened to Laura and why she had been killed. At first, the ghost said nothing, but then, in a low, hissing voice, she began to speak. "You want to know what happened to her? I'll tell you," the ghost said, her voice filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "She was a victim, just like me. We both lived alone, and we were both targeted by someone who wanted to do us harm." Emily listened intently, her heart racing with a mix of fear and curiosity. She wanted to know more, to understand what had happened to Laura and why the ghost was still haunting her. "The person who killed me was my own roommate," the ghost continued. "She was jealous of me, envious of the life I had, so she killed me, and then she took my body as her own. She lived in my skin, pretending to be me, until finally, she was caught and punished for her crimes." Emily felt a chill run down her spine as the ghost spoke. She couldn't believe that such a heinous crime could happen, let alone be repeated. But as she looked into the ghost's eyes, she could see the pain and suffering that she had endured, and she knew that it was all too real. "What can I do to help?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The ghost looked at her for a moment, and then she spoke again. "You can find the truth. You can make sure that justice is served. Find out who killed Laura, and make sure that they pay for their crimes." With that, the ghost disappeared, leaving Emily alone in her apartment, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. She knew that she had to take action, to find the answers that she had been seeking for so long. Over the next few days, Emily worked tirelessly to piece together the final clues in her investigation. She spent long hours poring over old police records, scouring the internet for any scrap of information that might help her solve the mystery. And finally, after weeks of work, she found what she had been looking for. The killer was Laura's own cousin, a woman who had always been jealous of her success and her independence. She had snuck into the apartment one night, intent on doing harm, but she had been caught in the act by Laura. In a fit of rage, she had killed her cousin, and then had hidden her body in the closet, hoping that no one would find her. With the evidence in hand, Emily went to the police, and she was finally able to get justice for Laura. The killer was arrested and put on trial, and Emily was able to find closure for the traumatic experience that had haunted her for so long. In the end, Emily realized that the silent roommate had been more than just a horrific story. She had been a victim, a young woman who had been taken before her time. But thanks to Emily's determination and courage, her story had finally been told, and justice had been served. And as she looked out over the city, she knew that she would never forget the lessons she had learned and the ghosts she had faced. But despite the closure she had found, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was still being watched. She couldn't escape the feeling that the silent roommate was still present, haunting her in some way. She tried to push the feeling aside, telling herself that it was just her imagination. But as the days passed, the feeling only grew stronger. She began to hear whispers in the night, and the sounds of footsteps echoing through her apartment. And then, one night, she saw something that made her blood run cold. As she lay in bed, unable to sleep, she saw the closet door slowly creak open, and there, standing in the doorway, was the ghost of the silent roommate. Her eyes were filled with anger and sorrow, and Emily knew that she was in grave danger. She tried to scream, to run, to do anything to escape, but her body was frozen, unable to move. The ghost approached her slowly, and then, with a sudden burst of rage, she lunged at Emily, grabbing her by the throat. Emily gasped for air, struggling against the ghost's grip, but she was no match for the supernatural strength of her attacker. She felt herself slipping away, losing consciousness. And then, suddenly, it was over. The ghost released her grip, and Emily fell to the floor, gasping for air. When she looked up, she saw that the ghost was gone, vanished into thin air. From that day forward, Emily knew that she could never truly escape the horror of the silent roommate. She knew that the ghost would always be with her, lurking in the shadows, waiting for her next opportunity to strike. And so, she lived the rest of her days in fear, always looking over her shoulder, always listening for the whispers in the night, for she knew that she could never truly be free, that the horror of the silent roommate would haunt her until the end of her days.